So now in Qt, we're going to cover the chapter about the containers. It's going to be including about the list. So in this chapter here, we have some few, it's not a lot of things. So we have few things that you will have to know. So you have been working with a QList. I can just say QList. You have been working with a QList. So QList, normally when we say we have been working it in C++, so when we were doing in code block, we were using the arrays. So the problem with arrays, it have, according to the memory allocation, it can be limited. But when you're using a list of things, in terms of a list, it can be fine, it can work properly. So in the QList, we can be mentioning, maybe it can be names of the people, it can be names of the months, it depends on the question. So normally when it works with a strings, maybe you are working with list of names, so you can use a QList. So in this QList is a template class. In other words, it's a template class. So it's a template class. So when a QList is a template class, in this QList, it uses the standard in C++. We used to say standard dot semicolon, whereby after that you can say cout. But normally when you were not used to do that, maybe, but you used to use because of we use the using namespace using namespace std, so it allows you to work with cout. So if you are not using namespace std, you will use the standard semicolon. So in this QList, as I have indicated to you, it falls under, we have something called the generic containers. So in generic container, so in generic container so in the generic container, this is their respective, it's a library which is considered of basic templates. It's a library, in other words. So I'm gonna define this generic container so that you can understand it. So when we talk about generic, so when we talk about the generic, we are talking about a classes or a function that accept a template parameter, so that they can operate on any type of classes. So in other words, let me just try to type what I said. Is a class or a classes or functions that accept a template. Remember, we are talking about something like a QList that accept a template parameters. So that they can operate on any type. So now when we talk about a container is an object. We can just say container, we can take it as an object. Container. So when we talk about the container, so containers are objects that can contain other objects. So they are objects that can contain other objects. So those are the definitions of generic container. So which means you can combine those two when you define generic container. So, and we can say it's a function or a classes that accept parameters so that they can operate on any type. Or you, when you combine it, you can put the word objects, but you don't really have to know you must know the definition, but you don't have to memorize it.
Okay.
So in order for us to use this QList, so the reason part why we are doing this is because of, you will be surprised when a person, when you see a code, is just and hash include QList, but you don't know what is the meaning of that. For example, you'll see a code written hash include QDebug, but you don't know exactly why do you have that. So the moment when you know about the theory, so it's going to be more easier for you to code anything, especially if you know the definition. So it will also help you to read the code properly and then to understand it. So we can also use QList in the client code that contain a declaration. So in this one, when we say it must contain a declaration, so you are going to declare your QList. In other words, yes. So when you QList, what kind of list is it? So when we say it's going to be declared, there will be declaration, you are going to declare it. So but when you declare, we are going to ask, what you might say, why do we have to declare it? We are going to declare because of what type of QList is it? It can be a QList. You can have a list of strings, as I've said. You can have a list of decimal numbers. You can have a list of integers. So it must be declared, that QList. So when it must be declared, you can declare your QList as follows. You can say, this is an example of how you can declare your QList. You can declare your QList as, for example, you can say QList, let's say it's for decimal, you can use double. So in this one here, when you use double, then is double, you can give it a name. This is a QList called double, let's say double list. Then you put a semicolon. Or if you want to declare your QList for string or for things, you can also declare a QList, your QList for things. When you declare it, the QList for things, you can name it as thing, like that list. So this is the way of how you can declare your QList. So in now you understand about the QList. And in QList, remember, we must also have an header file where is hash include QList. So we're gonna get there anytime soon. We're gonna get there. So now we're gonna go to iteration. We have things called iteration. You might be, or iterators, not iteration, let's just say iterator. So what is an iterator, or what do you know? Maybe you can guess it, that iteration, it can be something that maybe there is subdivisions. I'm just if you are guessing it in terms of maths. But when we talk about iterator, we are talking about an object that provides or indirect access to each element in a container. So we are talking about an object So we are talking about an object that provide indirect. This is indirect, there is just a spelling error. Let me change it. indirect access to each element in a container. So when we talk about this, this one is designed to be used, actually the iterators, they are designed to be used in a loop, so you must take that into account. They are designed to be used in a loop, so they are designed to be used in a loop. So those are iterators. So we gonna do more also about those iterators. So now in these iterators, when we talk about iterators, we also have something called a QStringList. QString, the way I'm writing it there, QStringList. So in QStringList is derived from a QList. So it's derived from a QList. So it inherits all of the QList. So when we talk about this QStringList, is derived from QList. So when we say it's derived from the QList, so it inherits everything QList have. It inherits everything that QList have, in other words. So which means when you use this QStringList, where it's everything have, so from the QList, so in this QStringList we can specify some, I'm gonna give you some few, but there are many of them, whereby we can specify in these strings. For example, in this string here, we can specify that you can have, maybe it's not only this, you can have the joining. For when we talk about join, we are talking about whereby you can use it to join two strings. So for example, you can be taking another string from another somewhere and another one, then you join them to be one thing. And we can also replace this. So when we used for the replace, we gonna use is gonna be replace in string. So these are functions. Everything I guess I understand that you understand when I write this. Especially you will notice that we are writing functions now. Especially anything when you see in terms of like this, you must remember that we are writing functions. So the other one, it can be for index of, and then the other one, it can be for find. Oh, there are many of them. I can give you a lot of examples, but now I'm gonna try to write a small program here, so that the purpose of writing this program is that you can see how I want to explain each and every step that I'm gonna be writing there in this program. So we are not gonna run it today. We're gonna run this program and more of them tomorrow. So include, remember, when we run our code, we're going to be using the qt include q string we're gonna use qdebug. So do you know about why we using this qdebug?
No.
All right, so we are going to use qdebug because of we are going to be qdebug is about the, when we talk about qdebug is about streams. When I say streams, input, let me say input stream or output streams. So it works like a cout. It's going to be working like a cout. In other words, yes, every time when you see this qdebug, knows that your program is going to be exactly working like a cout. There will be something, it's like the way when we are saying include iostream, but it's going to be working like a cout straight. So when we debug, it does a lot of things. So when I say it does a lot of things in this debug, when I say it can be outputting a message, maybe a warning message, anything that you want it to debug at that time. So that's why, but you must just take it as an output stream. Just say it's an output what stream. That's a best definition. So in hash include, again, we're gonna have a session. So this one, I'm not sure if you remember this header file. Do you remember it? Assets, see,
Yeah,
assets.
I remember.
Yes, this one you found it, you started learning it in chapter 5, if I'm not mistaken, in C++ cos 1512, whereby you were learning about functions, and in those functions you started with overloading functions. Then after that, when you use the asset, you use it for, so when you use the asset you use it for, let me think, the asset you use it for aborting the program if the condition is not specified. So when you use asset, see asset, you use it for aborting the program if the condition is not satisfied. So let's go to this one here. I was just writing the header files. We're gonna go to int main. QString winter. Okay, this program that I'm writing, I'm just going to explain about it, why I'm writing like that. So I'm writing this program to demonstrate about the listing, as we are talking about the program that list. So we might write a QString winter. In this QString winter here, I'm going to list the months that are winter. So the months that we can categorize them as winter, it can be June, July, some of them I will just abbreviate them, and August. So I will just say AOG. So this can be winter. Then we might want to, for spring, for example, we can say QString again for spring. This is just a name for this QString for spring. So for spring, I can say our spring maybe is March, and then April, and May. So we are taking that as the one for spring. So the Q string again for summer, we will take this one for summer as it can be for December. December will just abbreviate it. January also, Jan, I'll just write Jan, and February I'll just use Feb. So we have identified that in terms of winter, spring, and the summer. Then now we going to do some few things that I'm gonna be explaining to you now. So you will see that here I can use, I will say I'm declaring here, I'm declaring my Q string. So now I'm gonna say QStringList. So remember, when I say string list, I write list. This is my declaration. When this is my declaration, what is happening exactly? Why? You know now that a QString list is the same as for QList, and this one inherits everything, and it takes all the behavior of what? Of the QList. So that's why we are using it instead of saying QList only. So that's why we're using QStringList. So when we have this, we can use this list to say, okay, list, we can take for winter, input in winter, the way we have written it before there, winter. Then we can also say list. I'm still going to explain this, what is happening there. Plus or minus, plus equals to more. Here when I'm writing, you might think, okay, this is for incrementing, in other words, but I'm still going to give you more why are we doing that. And we can also write list again. In this list, we can append it. So when we append, we can append it to summer. So we have done that part there. And the other one that I can say, I can also say list, for example, to show if it's fail. I will explain also that. So let's start from list when it's winter. List when it's winter. So I'm gonna, for list when it's winter, is the same as an append operator. So an append operator, something that is taken like cout, the way you were using cout. So even this one list here, when we say plus equals to, whereby you know that it's like it's incrementing, it's gonna be adding more, but it's also an append operator. And the list dot append here, the summer one, this one is also an append member. It's a member function. So here it's an append, but in a form of a function, because you can see every time, just take into account when you see something with brackets, irrespective of the parameter, you can have something, anything, it's a, what is a member, it's a function. So this one also is the same as the other one, it's also append. So now when it appends, then we gonna move to another one. So we gonna have a Q debug. Okay, let me, we gonna have Q. Hello.
Yes, I want to ask the code or the line number 10.
Line number 10. Okay. Yeah, QStringList.
Yeah, what is it for?
This one here we are declaring, né? It's a declaration.
We declare.
Yes. Remember, QStringList, especially this name here, is the same. I already told you what is all about this one. QStringList is the what is the same as QList. So this one, it inherits everything that QList have. Remember, a QList, it must be declared.
Okay.
Now you understand.
Yeah.
So this statement is the same as I can write this way. I can say QList. Then I say list. So you see, I have declared it. So this is a declaration of, it's a declaration of this. That's why after that, when we have declared this list, we can use it here.
Okay, I understand.
Now you get it, né? All right. So now we're going to QDebug. So QDebug, I told you that is an output string. Not to debug, yeah, not debug. Debug. It's just that sometimes I end up pronouncing a word not the way they have to sound.
There's no master pronunciation.
Oh yeah, you know. So in this one here, is an output string. So we can say, for example, I can say Q debug for, I can say the spring months. I want to output the spring months are so when we show this one here, we can say, remember the Q months, they were in the form of list plus equals to as an increment. So as an increment, then we can put the list, we can say list 1. When we use this as, and I write 1 here, it's going to start with exactly the spring here. So this one here, when the way here, when we increment it, is going to go there, it's going to output March, April, and May. So let me also make May as a capital letter, M there as a capital letter. So now this one we are writing it because of this here. So when we have done that, this statement here, when it debug, is going to check for QString. Then it's gonna say, okay, the first list 1 in the spring is what? Those are March, April, and May. Those are the list 1 in that spring. So now we can also want to join maybe those months. We might want to output all the months from January to December. So when we want to output all the months from January to December, we can also again declare a string. So when we declare a string, we can declare a Q string. We can just say Q string like that, even if it's not a list. This Q string is the same way when you declare a string. Like in the C++ before, we can set screen all the months. When we say screen all the months, we can say equals to, but the purpose of this one, remember, we want to join all the list. So all the list here, we already wrote all of them, 1 2 3 there. So we can say list, because this list is already been declared, dot join. Join is a function, remember. So when we say dot join, we can, because they are going to be joined, we can separate them with a semicolon. Then I will put a semicolon. Let me just make a space there. So they will be joined and being separated by semicolon. So when they are joined and being separated by semicolon, this is just a function. We just make a function. But this function, it won't output them. Then we're gonna need a QDebug again. Then to output, to QDebug function, it will output them. So we can just say all months, the way we have written here in this, all the way I've written there. I will put the semicolon. So after that, when I've done that, this one is going to output those months that we just wrote there. So remember, in this code, we just declared the months. We didn't ask the user to input. There is nothing that is being inputted there. We just declare them. So now we have done that. We have done the Q string. Okay.
The Q in QDebug, is supposed to be a capital letter Q and then a small letter D.
No. Is the letter capital letter? It must be small capital letter Q, and the capital letter D, it must be the big one. Here I just made a mistake also. I was going to change it. It must be like this, Q. No, this one here, when you declare, it must be in the capital letter, but this one here, you must use the small letter.
Okay.
Yeah. So remember, this one, it does not, it's just a class, né? It's a class. I already told you that it is an output stream. So it provides an output stream for debugging information. So let's proceed with the program. So in this program now, we're gonna put the QStringList. We can want to split. To split is like it means like the word it define itself actually. So if you want to split those months, we can just use a Q. You can declare it as a Q string list. Let's say we already have a list, remember. So if I just write that like this, I can define it as list 2. Then when I say list 2, I can say this is equals to all the months dot a split. So in split here, we are going to split them. We can separate them with a semicolon. So when we separate them with a semicolon, so this one is to split them. So I will give you more definition about it, but there is nothing much that you have to know about that. Then now we did have before, remember, we did have a function about asset. So and asset, I told you that it's to make a program to abort, to stop if the conditions are not met. So now we can program our assets. Assets, you learn it. I also told you that you learned assets in functions. So we must have assets, but we're also gonna have some functions that they're going to talk about this. So if now we have an asset, asset. So in our asset here in this we're splitting. Remember, we have list 2 to split them. So if our asset, when we say asset, we're going to say list 2 dot size of this list is not the size list 2 dot size is equals to 12. What must happen if the list dot size equals to 12? Then we can use a for loop. So when we use a for loop, we can use a for loop. So when we use our for loop, we can use this is the same as a for loop. We can say for each. So this for loop is for the Qt. You can use it in like writing it this way for each in Qt. Normally this for loop, it was in terms of in the Java